Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran. Sanctum of Domination World First Race has started this week, and it's really heating up where guilds are already at Sylvanas. We actually might have the fastest World First Race of any that I've been paying attention to as of recently. It's also very interesting to see which guilds bring which classes to the World First Race. There's a lot of different strategies and different approaches with all these different fights in order to be able to overcome the challenge as quickly as possible to get to Sylvanas and claim that World First Mythic. In this video, I wanted to highlight the 5 class specs that are performing exceptionally well in this new raid. Whether these class specs are allowing guilds to perform certain strategies that we've never seen before, or are simply just so popular that guilds are stacking masses of them to down some of the toughest fights in the brand new raid of Sanctum of Domination. So let's take a look at the 5 specs that are either surprising or expectedly performing really well inside of this brand new raid. The first one we'll talk about are the healers, and one of the most stacked healers right now in this raid is the Holy Paladin. Before I really start gushing about Holy Priests, none of the healers in the game are bad. Just different guilds are trying out different strategies in order to overcome some of these bosses, and it just seems that the Holy Paladin toolkit as well as the Venti or damage that it brings just fits the situation so far. Out of all the different healers, this is the one healer that's the most stacked for the World First Race. Not every guild is doing this at the top level, but a lot of players, if any healer is stacked, Holy Paladins are stacked by the dozens. Holy Paladins are also fantastic for raid content. They have incredible survivability toolkit, whether for themselves or their allies. So it was a no-brainer that they were going to be mandatory for a lot of the guilds, but also Blizzard tried to really nerf down the damage of the Venti or Paladin Ashen. But at the time the nerfs came out on PTR, a lot of people that were Paladin players said, we're still miles ahead. This nerf is going to dampen us a little, but we're still going to be pretty far ahead of other healers in damage. And it looks like those players were right. Another spec that was expected to do really well was the Balanced Druid. I could have mentioned a lot of different range DPS on this list. Destro Warlocks are doing fantastic. You even have some people going Demonology Warlocks. We even seen Arcane Mages performing pretty well. Frost Mages are everywhere, but the one range DPS that's the most stacked in at least 4 at a time for some guilds is the Balanced Druid. Now, some people obviously lost their heads at first when they announced 9.1 nerfs for Balanced Druids. In fact, they've nerfed a lot of range DPS at the start of the PTR, but Boomy, out of all of them, still maintains a very high level of play going into World First Race. We saw nerfs to Affliction Warlocks, we saw nerfs to Fire Mages, we saw nerfs to Shadow Priests, even those guys actually performing not too bad right now. But Boomies was another one of those range DPS that got nerfed, and a lot of players believe that maybe this is where Elemental Shaman is going to shine. Ally Shamans have had some good performance and have been brought in for the World First Race as well. But if you were to ask me, what's one range DPS that you've seen just about every single raid using, even like 2 of them, 3 of them, maybe even 4 of them at a time, Balanced Druid takes the cake. Now let's talk about the more surprising picks. None of the tanks in the game are essentially bad. All of them can tank bosses just fine. Certain tanks do have that extra tankiness to them, or just more damage, or certain utilities that bring to a raid or a dungeon group that just makes them a little bit better for the content. That being said, Protection Paladin has always had a bit of a stigma, at least in the Mythic Plus world and raiding, that they're kind of squishy. They do a lot of damage, but they also take a lot of damage, and some healers are wary when running with a Protection Paladin tank. But we have good news, because all these prots are actually doing really well in the World First Race, and quite a lot of guilds are using prots in order to achieve success. Let's take a step back. Prot pallies have always been good. They're a great off tank with a awesome set of tools to help a raid succeed. Their toolkit utility is amazing, between sacrifice, between blessings, freedom, you have blessing of protection, you have a bubble of your own, you have a variety of different defenses to deal with bosses, you can off heal, you have a silence with an interrupt mechanic with your shield. There's quite a lot of cool things about Paladin, but the raw damage they brought into Sanctum of Domination was a bit of a surprise. If you thought Venti or Holy Paladin was pretty crazy, a Protection Paladin is even crazier. These guys are insane. Seriously, when I say this, don't get me wrong, none of the tanks are bad for this raid. Eventually, every single tank spec in the game is going to see Mythic Sylvanas dead and receive their cutting edge. None of them are so bad that they can't tank this raid. It's just Protection Paladin in particular for the World First brought in actually ludicrous amounts of damage that I felt like it's worth highlighting them. I didn't think everybody were going to expect a Protection Paladin to be the go-to tank. I think a lot of people expected Avenged Demon Hunter again, since they were really good last season. Maybe Prot Warrior, since that worked out for Castle Nothria. Brewmaster, people talked about that. Blood DK, there's a lot of magic damage that needs to be healed. But Protection Paladin, I feel like kind of surprised me in particular. Let's talk about another surprising pick. It's kind of surprising, but also not really, but it's going to be Subtlety Rogue. A lot of us that were prepping for this raid were expecting Assassination Rogues to do well. I mean, you have Sylvanas Daggers that's just going to amp up the damage a rogue does, and Assassination just was doing really well in the raid testing for single target damage, but it looks like Subtlety kind of snuck out of nowhere and just ambushed at the bosses, propelling it forward into that frontline spot of bringing a rogue to a raid. If I had to take a look at some of the things about Subtlety, we could talk about how the damage is actually pretty good with the new Obedience legendary, the legendary for the Ventio Rogue, synergized really well with Subtlety playstyle. It feels great, I played it and tested it. I guess you could also point to the survivability of a rogue, Sculpt of Shadows. I mean, that can work for certain boss mechanics. Cheat death, I mean, you can literally cheat certain mechanics. Feint, so you don't really need to micromanage the rogue when it comes to AoE damage that's going out. But what really made rogues, and Subtlety in particular, is the enhanced interaction with a totem. We'll talk about that totem in a bit, but because of this melee totem interaction, that's what really made Subtlety good. Subtlety benefits highly from auto attacks, and with a specific totem that buffs your auto attack damage or really gives you more auto attacks, that's what gives Subtlety a little bit of a go head start. It is really good damage right now. It's not really the fact that Subtlety is amazing, it's just Subtlety's particular auto attack interaction with a totem from a specific spec that we'll talk about in a second. That's what really made it surprisingly good. A lot of us were expecting Assassination to be the pick, but it looks like if people are bringing a rogue, it's usually a Subtlety Rogue to this raid. And finally, the most surprising pick that I think everybody can agree has been something that almost nobody expected is the Enhancement Shaman. That's what we were talking about, the totem, the Windfury totem playstyle. To be honest, Enhancement Shamans are not bad, but they're not really bringing Enhancement Shaman because they're just doing the top damage. In fact, you're actually playing, quite a lot of guilds are playing a build where they'll create a melee party of 5, Enhancement being one of them, and Enhance is going to be there to bolster some of the other classes like Arms Warriors and Subtlety Rogues in order to get more auto attack damage. I guess you can throw in Demon Hunters there as well, because Windfury totem by itself, it's an okay buff. It actually has had some benefits to certain classes depending on whether you're two-hander or dual wield, whether you benefit from auto attacks with different procs or whether you don't. And those numbers generally have been low enough where guilds haven't seriously considered Enhancement Shamans for like a melee party playstyle. But with this raid, it looks like the numbers are high enough where you could actually bring an Enhancement Shaman, load the party up with sub-rogues who can benefit from auto attacks, arms warriors who can benefit from auto attacks. You actually have like a very, very solid build. So Enhancement isn't really going to be the spec at the top of the pyramid, at the very tippity top, leading their allies to greatness. You're more towards the base. And on top of you are going to be some of the other melee DPS that are really going to crank out those numbers. Don't get me wrong, Enhancement Shamans bring the Windfury totem, but also they have the speed totem, so the party can go from A to B very quickly. They are tankier than most hunters. They have pretty decent survivability. Their damage is also not even bad. Bloodlust is also really good, but you're really there to make other classes look better. I'm just really a huge fan of the fact that Enhancement Shaman is actually getting incorporated, and not only just into a raiding environment, but world first raiding environment. So I definitely had to make him the #1 pick for this list, the last one on this list, because this one was the most surprising, but a genuinely good surprise nonetheless. So this is going to be my video of the 5 specs that I feel like are dominating currently in the brand new raid. Every single class and spec in the game, even the Covenant combo, is eventually going to see Sylvanas Mythic dead, but it's still interesting to see some of the guilds and some of the strategies they're going to employ. And because all these strategies obviously are going to trickle down to the other guilds, other players and guilds are going to try to employ the same strategies, try the same classes and the same playstyles in order to see if they can overcome the challenge that is Sylvanas Windrunner and Sanctum of Domination Mythic. And I felt like these 5 class specs are the ones that are kind of leading the charge forward, and I think a lot of guilds are going to try to see if they can emulate the same success as some of the top guilds are achieving right now. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you guys in another video.